We're here at the American Museum of the Cuban Diaspora, filming another episode of the Cuban Podcast. And we are with a very, very dear friend of our community, of this museum, of the Cuban exile community, a pioneer in what we call the building of Miami. And he is our great friend, Willy Bermello. Willy, thank you so much for being here. I've actually been waiting for this moment, for this episode, because you are someone very special to this community. There's nothing like putting a fingerprint or your work or your hands on the development of a community, right? And I think, once you're completely done with your job and with your career, you can look back and be able to really look at your life's work and be proud of that. So thank you for being here, Willy.
Jesús, thank you very much for inviting me. For me, it's always great to be here at the Cuban Museum, at the American Museum of the Cuban Diaspora. It's a place that it's very close to my heart. Its entire board of directors, Marcel Felipe, Diego Suarez, and all the staff here that I love and that have supported me throughout the years. And I'm happy to be here with you and with your listening and viewing audience. So we talk a little bit about how Miami has evolved over the years and what it has taken and how it grew from a little sleepy old town to the cosmopolitan world-class city that it is today. And without a doubt, the fate of Cuba in 1959, people here in Miami had no idea what was coming next. And the best that ever happened to Miami was the fact that we arrived in these shores. And you can see it in the skyline, you can see it in the culture, you can see it in the people, you can see it in the vibe of Miami today. The 305, it has Cuban written all over it.
Yes, sir.
So I'm very happy to be here with you and with everybody that's part of the Cuban Podcast. Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely, thank you, Willy. So I wanna be able to start off because a lot of the guests that we bring, obviously there's always a tie to the island, right? There's always a tie, whether they were born there, whether there was an influence, and someone of your stature, right? People see you and they see a very successful man. I think sometimes when an individual has a lot of success, maybe to the public, they might be a little intimidated, right? To ever see you in the street and come up to you and say hi to you. So I want people to have the opportunity to get to know Willy today, right? I want people to know the man. I want people to know who the child was, right? Willy Bermello, so that people can see you and know who you really are, right? So why don't we start off with Willy? Where are you from? Where were you born? Tell us a little bit about your childhood.
So, Jesús, I was born in El Vedado, in La Habana, Cuba, in 1950. And my parents were, middle-class family. My father was a self-made man. He came from very modest beginnings. My father was born in Camagüey. He worked in the Central Pina as a young man. His parents died at an early age. And he had to fend for himself and to take care of his two sisters and his brother. They moved to Havana, and my father had 3 jobs. And while he had jobs working night and day, he enrolled in the University of Havana. And by the time that he graduated, just about the time that I was born, he had a doctorate in commercial science. He was a CPA, and he was an attorney.
Wow.
And he had also been president of the student council in the University of Havana. So he had when people say, your community activities and where does that come from, I have to tell you, Jesús, I think it's in the genes, because my father definitely had that leadership within him, and that interest, that commitment, esa inquietud for helping the community from the moments that he was at the University of Havana. We came to this country. But you always remember, and it's important for people that are listening to us. I mean, we did not emigrate. We did not come here because we wanted to come to the United States. And I don't mean that with any sense of disrespect. I love this country. I love this country as my adopted country that took us in. But we came here with a very specific plan to reorganize and to return and regain our homeland. I recall that we arrived on the 22nd of October, 1960.
How old were you?
I was 9 years old. And by the way, when we got here, when we left Havana, my father, my mother, and we each had $5 in our pockets. Now, I want people to understand, there was no American Express, there was no Diners Club, there was no MasterCard, there was none of that. We had no credit, we had no money, we had nothing. We arrived here with nothing. That $15 paid for the taxi from the airport to Miami Beach. We stayed at the Short Crest Hotel for 1 week until a family that was a friend of my father's came from Cuba and they paid our bill at the hotel. And then we went to live with them in a 1-bedroom efficiency in Normandy Island.
Wow.
Okay?
Yeah.
That was just before the elections, the November elections of 1960, when Richard Nixon lost to John F. Kennedy. The month after we thought that if Nixon won, we would be heading back to Cuba any moment. A month afterwards, my father started working for the CIA, handling the back of house operations. There was a group of about 8 of them. They were too old to go and fight, but they were young enough to do all the administrative and the logistical and legal support.
Yeah.
But that wasn't a big paycheck for my dad. That was enough to put a little bit of bread on the table. In fact, we still would go to the Freedom Tower, La Torre de la Libertad, on a weekly basis. My mother would get these Velveeta sheets. It was a big bar. And then we would have eggs and milk in powder. I mean, it wasn't a bottle of milk and a carton of eggs. No, it was powdered milk, powdered eggs. And the other thing was Spam. They would give us these cans, and that was our meal at nighttime. My best meal was going to Riverside Elementary School in the morning, and then lunchtime. So, I mean, in those days,
wow,
it's not like today. Today, everybody's living in the hug life. Everybody's doing great. Everybody has, everybody's driving a Mercedes, a Maserati. Everybody's ready. You Uber here. You have second homes. No. Those days, there was absolutely nothing. Wow. My father's first car was a 1937 Cadillac that had a hole. Jesus, the hole on the floor, I could see the pavement through the floor of the car.
Wow. Yeah.
At the age of 10, I was selling newspapers at the corner of 8th Street and 17th. There used to be a Pure gas station there. Now, 8th Street in those days is not like today. Today, it's a one-way street to Brickell. Those days, it was a two-way street. And I would sell the Miami News Blue Streak Final. I would get this little apron they would bring, and right after school, my father would walk with me from Riverside to the corner of 18th and 8th Street and 17th Avenue, and I would sell the newspaper until sundown. And with that, I was able to buy my first bicycle. And then I got a route with the Miami Herald.
Oh, wow.
And then with that, I got enough money that after school, I could go to Royal Castle every day and eat 4 hamburgers. So at nighttime, I didn't have to depend on my mother's Spam, Velveeta cheese, or any of that stuff from Refugio.
Willy, let me ask you, because it's that story is amazing, and lately we've been having many events in the Freedom Tower, which today obviously it's also a museum. Many different heads of states have visited, right, the Freedom Tower. Tell me a little bit about, and maybe it's more for me because I love history, right, and that building has so much meaning, right? Tell me what would that be like when you would visit that?
Jesus, that if you're from New York, or your parents immigrated from Europe, the Freedom Tower to us Cubans is the Ellis Island of Italians and Irish in New York. This was our safety net. This was the one place that you would go either for a dentist or to get a vaccination or to get the simplest staple of food so that you would have something to eat in those days. There were no other handouts. It wasn't the United Way taking care. There was nothing. You would walk down A Street and there were signs that would say no Hispanic, no dogs, no blacks. I mean, when we arrived here, I remember going to Jordan Marsh. There were restrooms for whites and blacks. You would go on a bus and they would, I remember one day we were just going normally towards the back for no reason at all, and the chauffeur stopped the car the bus and said, "You come back down. You can't be in the back. That's for blacks. You got to come to the." That was Miami in 1960. Very different than the Miami of today. Today we have a cosmopolitan, open, free society. Very, very, very different.
Yeah.
And the difference is what Cubans like my parents and your parents and the parents of those that are listening were able to do in those early days in the first decade between 1960 and 1970.
Yes, sir.
We laid the ground. We were the beachhead. We were that cultural beachhead that converted Miami from what it was back then. I mean, people down, they would, you know how they would say Miami? Miami. Whenever I heard Miami, I knew what they were trying to tell me. They don't like me. They don't like the fact that I'm Spanish. They don't like the fact that I look different, that I talk different, that I walk different, that I like different music and different food. So it was a different, now still this country's a great country, but it was a different era.
Right.
And that changed for the better. And not only culturally, but also in every matter of life. And in my profession, I've had the ability to help change the landscape with iconic and beautiful buildings that talk about the new era of Miami. And that new era is thanks to the Exile community.
That's right.
That was hardworking, that was basically empresarios. And we're talking about people that came here that in Cuba, they had their own businesses, that they were professionals. And they came here, they came to wash dishes and, work in hotels. And like my dad, who did whatever he had to do, ended up working for the CIA. I mean, it was great in that moment because we're helping the Cuban revolutionary movement here to go back to Cuba. But in those days, I mean, we were scrappy. We were fighting for everything that we could get to rebuild the area that we have today. I mean, when you think about the first banks that we had here, they weren't lending on credit, they were lending on name.
That's right.
Republic National Bank.
That's right.
Republic National Bank, and then today Ocean Bank. Those were banks that allowed the Cuban community to thrive because they were energetic, they were forthright in their thinking, they were strategic, and Miami is better because of that today.
The character loans.
Those were character loans.
Yeah, the character loans, and we talk about it all the time, Willy. Esa generación, ¿no? que hemos visto al principio, que vinieron aquí de Cuba, es una generación que pienso yo que nunca se va a ver otra vez, ¿verdad? Tenían ese deseo, ¿no? Para echar para adelante, arriesgar todo, right? Dejar todo en la isla que nacieron y que se criaron y venir a un país completamente nuevo, ¿no? Diferente. Pero let me ask you this. It seems like you went through a lot, right? You went through a lot. Your parents did everything that they could to give you as close to a normal life as they can. You went through a childhood that, no one will ever go through today, for the most part, right? But I want to ask you, what was the transition, right? So you, 9, 10 years old, you were selling newspapers, you went to Riverside, which I know there's a great story there that I want to hear about it as well. Where did you go to college?
Okay, but you know what, if I can go back a second, Jesus?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because, so I tell people that I went from having everything on a 30-minute trip to having nothing. I'm talking about material things. Because when in Cuba, so in 1959, Castro comes in, January 1st. My father had been part of the anti-Batista revolutionary movement. Not in the hills, but in Havana. With the student movement at the University of Havana. And so my father got a job as one of 5 magistrates in the Castro government in 1959, at the beginning of 1959. And there were 5 magistrates in what would be in the United States, the Office of Management and Budget.
Okay.
El Tribunal de Cuentas. There were 5 magistrados. My father was one of them. And in the spring of 1959, my father goes with those other 4 to Brazil with Castro. And in that trip, in a private meeting, the 5 magistrates asked Castro, about where he's going with the country. And he said to them, at that point in time, that he was taking Cuba in the line of Marxist, Leninist. At that moment, and at that moment the five afterwards privately said, we got to get the heck out of here. So for over a year, we had the G2 is the Secret Service of Cuba, situated in front of our house. So the day that I left my house to go to the airport, I had no idea where I was going because I had no suitcases. I simply went with my parents in a car, which is a government car with a chauffeur, for a ride. During a period of 3 months, my mother had events at our house, and friends of my father that were of confidence to my father each had a suitcase of ours that my mother had prepared in the garage. So the day that we arrived at the airport and we were under surveillance, nobody knew where we were going. They had seen no suitcases. There was no movement that said we're leaving the country. I mention this because it is very different than you deciding and making plans, I'm going to leave my country, I'm going to go to the United States, where there's already an establishment, a culture, there's already a platform of help and assistance with friends. When we came here, and I think it's important to understand, there was nothing. There was nothing.
Yeah.
My father left Cuba having no idea what he was going to find, other than he knew that he had $5 in his pockets, but he had to leave, and he had to leave now, or face prison. So it's that mindset that you're risking everything because you have no backstop, you have no going back, gives you a tremendous impetus to work hard, to have a tremendous work ethic. So I think what I saw in my father is what I saw in thousands of other Cubans that came in similar fashion at that time. There was no going back. There was no plan B. There was no alternative. There was only one way to go, and that's to put yourself to the grind, work very hard, blood, sweat, and tears, no excuses, and don't look for excuses in terms of why something didn't happen. You make it happen, and you work hard. And it was that commitment that I saw then, that frankly, I don't know if I see that today in some of the generations that I see now and young people when I talk to them. We were very focused, very disciplined. And I think that's the reason why we have, and we can enjoy the things that we see today.
That's right.
And I agree with you. I think what happened in that 10-year span will never be repeated again. I don't think there's ever been an immigration of people to this country that matches what has happened here in Miami. I mean, today Miami is better, way better than New York. I mean, thanks also to Mandani and what he's slowly, he's destroying New York, one decree by decree, right? But I think the Cuban exile community, what it was able to do here in Miami by its own bootstraps, it's just something that is dignified and worth telling our story.
Yep. No, and it's a. I feel like it was a sense of purpose, right? You have a lot of kids today walking around aimlessly, right? Without purpose, right? Without drive, and it becomes very sad to see that, especially knowing who their parents are or were, or who their grandparents were, right? Like that to me, I think it's probably a sad thing to really understand. But Willy, you came to this country, you struggled. I believe your family thought that you guys were going to be here temporarily.
Oh, temporarily. I mean,
right.
we had when my father got that job with the CIA, I recall that one of the first things that he did once he bought a car, we went to this place called Shell City. Shell City is in what today is called Alapata. And at Shell City, we bought these duffel bags. They were yellow, they were about 1.5 meters long, and we had all of our belongings packed in that duffel bag in our house. We were just waiting for the call to go back. So we did not come here thinking that we were going to establish roots here. we came here for a very temporary time. This was only to regroup, fight, and then head back. And after the missile crisis, like they say in English, the writing was on the wall. This is, en español dicen, pica y se extienda. You know, this was going to be for the long haul. At that point, we knew, and my father said, you know, there's no going back. This is, but now, obviously, my father passed away 14 years ago. He's now in heaven, smiling at us today. And I think now, for the first time, thanks to our president, Donald Trump, and what he did on January 3rd in Venezuela, that I think right now, I think all of us see that there's a light at the end of the tunnel.
That's right.
And that light is a free and democratic Cuba.
That's right. That's right. I think you know, we're all waving and we're all cheering our president and our Secretary of State Marco Rubio that together they make a phenomenal team. Right.
No, and also the fact that we have three great congressmen in
That's
Mario
right.
Diaz-Balart, Carlos Jimenez, and María Elvira Salazar.
Sí,
We have tremendous triumvirate in those three. But Marco Rubio, my gosh,
Yep.
he is beyond.
Yeah.
So presidential.
Yep.
I'm so proud of him.
Yeah.
He makes all of us proud.
Yep. Makes you very, very proud. Very, very proud. When did you decide, Willy, that you wanted to be an architect?
Well, so Jesus, that's a good question, because in my case, it started very early, and it started in Cuba. So my dad, in the late 1950s, he would take me to, we lived at that time in Miramar, and he would take me to this new subdivision that was being developed outside of, in the western part of Miramar, an area called the Biltmore section. And they were building this, it was basically a subdivision, let's say like Coral Gables, that was under construction. The architecture style in Cuba was so advanced at that time in the 1950s. Cuba was in the vanguard of the international style. I mean, Cuban architects were competing with architects all over the world. And really, the level of architecture in Cuba was beyond anything that you would see in Latin America. And my father would take me to this subdivision, not to see the architecture. He would take me because I wanted to drive. So he would sit me in his lap, and I would sit on his lap, and I would drive this 1955 Oldsmobile that he had. And I would drive around the subdivision, and as I drove, I saw all these new houses that were under construction, modern architecture, and it impressed me. It impressed me immensely, to the point that I said to my dad, I want to do these houses when I grow up. My grandfather, who worked in a sugar mill called Toledo outside of Havana, he had always wanted to be an architect, but he never went to school. He didn't have that option of going to school. So I know that my grandfather had that in him, and I would tell my granddaddy and my father, you know, when I grow up, I want to be an architect. I want to build houses. That's the way I saw it. So when we came to this country, that was already ingrained in my mind. I wanted to be an architect from the time that I was like 6, 7 years old. And it never even doubted in my mind as I went to school here. I went through, so I'm a product of the Dade County public school system. From Normandy Isle, when I went to Treasure Island, then in La Sabuesera, where I went to Riverside. Then we moved a little further to the area near where Versailles is. I went to Auburndale, then Kinloch Elementary or middle school, and then Gables High. When I left Gables, I applied to the University of Florida, and I went to the University of Florida based on the Cuban loan. My parents didn't have money to send me to college, but there was a Cuban loan at that time that made it possible for students like me to attend the university. By the way, I repaid my loan, unlike what Biden did, giving out all these freebies for people that really, I mean, listen, when you get a loan, you know, the American way is you pay your debt.
Right.
And that's very, very important. I mean, if you're listening to me, listen, the thing about my father told me was always responsibility. And it's very interesting that the only money that my father received from the federal government in those early years, he paid it back. And I still have the letter that actually I given to the museum, where the Department of Interior didn't know what to do with the money. They said, sir, that was a grant. I said, my father, I don't need grants.
That's right.
You give me money, I'm repaying it.
Yeah.
That same concept of responsibility, that you pay your debt to society, So my Cuban debt was paid. And I loved Florida. I met the greatest friends there. One of the former commissioners who passed away last year, Manolo Reyes, and I remember that we were part of this little gang that we were very right-wing. And at that time, when I was going to college, was the anti-Vietnam era. And so we had a group of Cubans that would be the opposition to the liberal movement in the universities, which unfortunately, today what we're seeing, Jesus and we may be getting off track here, but someone was asking me what's happening in this country. And I think what's happening in this country is that the educational system, instead of teaching kids about civic, about national pride, about the areas that made this country great, they're into DEI and teaching them things that should not be even taught in school. We need to do a better job in educating our kids, because I see this time and time again. Some kids go to Harvard, they go to different universities, Ivy League, and when they come back, their mind is twisted. And the ideals that have made this country what it is somehow are getting lost in our educational system with some kind of, voodoo socialism that is entering the educational system, creating, a very liberal mentality in our young people.
Well, let me tell you something, Willie. I mean, and I know we might be veering a little bit, but that's as a father of 3 little girls, right? I mean, that is a huge concern of my wife and I, right? Where we've even been considering homeschooling because of everything you see, right, and everything you hear, and your worry that your child is gonna throw every value that you've taught them out the window the moment they step into one of these schools, right? That's a valid concern.
I mean, Jesus, the values that you and we were brought up of what was proper conduct, what were the things that you subscribe to, today are things that are critiqued, that are thought of as being antisocial, and then the things that we always considered bad, that were not normal behavior, that wasn't mainstream, those things today are made into mainstream. So, you can't let your kids get online with the stuff that's out there for little ones. I mean, there's no filter. Some countries have filter. Now, some people say, "Oh, that's censorship." Well, there's certain things that youngsters should not be exposed to.
Right.
They're not ready to see those things. And even when they go to college, there's a continuous, indoctrination, liberal indoctrination that starts in elementary school. And the media in this country, I mean, you see it. I mean, it's continuously, and what happens is that you become what you hear and who you associate with.
That's right.
And if you're continuously hearing this same dogma that this country is racist, that this country is bad, that this country, that the rich people should not have money. I mean, it's kind of crazy what they're doing in New York. I mean, and you see it in New York, and you see it in many major cities. You see it in the entire state of California.
Yeah.
So that is very concerning, because sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Donald Trump had not won in 2024, and we would have had Kamala Harris. And I know that this is not to talk about politics, but it's all related. Today, what we're seeing in terms of Cuba is because Donald Trump is there. Let's face it.
That's right.
Listen, I'm Republican. We've had Republican presidents, and we've had Democratic presidents. None of them did anything except lip service until Donald Trump took the White House.
That's right.
And if you're from Venezuela and you're not applauding what he did on January 3rd, well, shame on you. Because I applaud what he did on January 3rd, because I realize what this means for Cuba down the line. Because Cuba was being kept in a lifeline by Venezuela and by Maduro and Chavez before him. And that story is now over. So I'm kind of hoping that the Iran situation is resolved quickly, that we maintain the House in November, and that Cuba will be next, and we'll have a free Cuba in 2027. And you and I will be doing a second podcast to talk about that future.
That's normally how I end these things, saying that. So you beat me to it. Pero Willy, so you've done so many projects in your life. Tell me, leave the big one for last. All right, I want to bring that one up. I want to bring that one up. But before that, tell me about 2 or 3, or even before we get there, what was the project that put Willy Bermello on the map? What was that one project that showed your stripes, that gave you that stamp of approval and showed the world this man from Cuba, right, that came here and busted his butt to get to where he's at? He's real and he's helping shape Miami. What was it?
You know, Jesus, it's difficult to say that it was one thing. It's like if you ask Michael Phelps which of the 28 gold stars that in the Olympics, which one was the one who set him apart? Well, it was all 28. It was winning those medals. Mm-hmm. It's 28 medals, not a single, but they add up. Right. You know, they start adding up. But I would say that as I go back in time, there were a number of moments. Probably I will say 3, and usually in those moments, you know, it wasn't. You know, I mean, first we have a God that is all-knowing, that is merciful, and that I am a follower of Jesus Christ, and I truly believe that He has a plan and He has a purpose, and I'm just fulfilling that plan and that purpose. But there were 3 moments that I think were I think kind of like critical, that things started to happen. One I would say was the Four Seasons Tower in Brickell. And the man there is my good friend Manny Medina. And Manny at that time was president of Terramark, a development company that was my client, and I also was on the board of directors. And Manny did a deal with a man by the name of Chris Jeffries of Millennium Partners in New York. And when nobody believed Manny, the executives of Ocean Bank believed in him. And he had bought a property in Brickell, and Manny wanted to do something great, and I was the architect. And to make a long story short, Manny gave me the opportunity to do what for many years Jesus was the tallest building south of Atlanta. This building was, I mean, it was so tall that we had to get a special permit from the FAA. Wow. At that time, we spent $650 million building that project. This is in the year 2000.
Wow.
Okay?
Yeah.
This is 26 years ago. And this building was almost 750 feet tall. It was really, really tall. And no one had spent as much money with as much quality of materials in such a beautiful tower as the Four Seasons. It had a Fernando Botero sculpture inside. It had a tremendous waterfall, 3 different uses, hotel, offices, and luxury residences. So when that building was built, it was iconic immediately. So that I think to many people signaled the fact that we were here and we were a major player.
How old were you at that moment?
At that moment, well, that was year 2000. I was, let's see, so I was 60? Yeah. Let's see.
Right in your late 50s.
50. I was 50 years old.
Wow.
I just turned 50 years old.
Yeah.
And so that was one. I think another one, I started to tell you the story, which was very interesting, which was the University of Miami. So I did my first project at the University of Miami in 1977, and it was the School of Business, and a great project. I finished that project in like 1979. The project was built, and then we continued doing additions. And then all of a sudden, the president of the University of Miami, at that time was Henry King Stanford. And Henry King Stanford leaves the University of Miami, and we get a new president by the name of Tad Foote. And when Tad Foote comes, he brings in a new dean. And what was interesting is that I had written a letter to the prior dean during Henry King Stanford, a letter about an idea to create a new auditorium at the School of Business. You know how you write a letter and you say, well, I've got an idea, I want to share it with you. And I sent it to the prior dean during Henry King Stanford. I never hear back from that dean, but that dean takes that letter and gives it to his associate dean. The associate dean's name was Paul Segru. So Paul Segru takes my idea, he likes it, he doesn't tell me anything, and he files it away. Fast forward Henry King Stanford leaves. Tad Foote comes in. When Tad Foote comes in, he fires the prior dean. He does interviews. And who does he hire for the dean of the School of Business? Paul Segru, the gentleman that had been the associate dean with the prior dean.
That's right.
So Paul Segru, 7 years after I've written the letter, calls me one day and says, Willy, I'm Paul Segru. Do you remember me? I said, Mr. Segru, I don't really recall. He says, well, I was at a meeting with the former dean. You wrote a letter. The former dean opened the letter, read it, showed it to me, and he said, here, you take it. I took your letter and I kept it in my files. And you know what I'm going to do now? Your dream, I'm going to hire you to now do the dream that 7 years ago you suggested to the then dean.
Wow.
So that, Jesus, that started a whole series of expansions to the School of Business that makes today the School of Business at the University of Miami what it is today.
And you had completely forgotten about it.
I had forgotten about that letter. I had taken an initiative.
Yeah.
Someone has said, I'm a dreamer. Listen, I'm a dreamer. And there's another story that we'll talk about at the end that also started with a dream. I'm a dreamer, and I always tell people, be careful who you share your dreams with, because there are a lot of dream killers out in the world.
That's right.
So, but every great idea, every project that you see, start with an idea. And sometimes those ideas come to you late at night. In my case, sometimes I'm taking a shower and I'm dreaming and thinking, and these ideas come. So that idea of what happened at the University of Miami was an idea that I wrote down in a letter and I sent to the dean, and nothing happened for 7 years. So sometimes, you plant a seed and the gestation period may be 6 months, maybe a year. In this case, it was 7 years, but it actually came to fruit. And then that solidified ourselves with the case of the University of Miami. And the last one that not to talk about the big one, but we are known all over the world as the port guys. We have done maritime terminals all over the world, Jesus. From Hong Kong, Singapore, Seattle, New York, Norfolk, you name it. If there's a port, the Bermello Hamil team has been there. And a few years back, we were in a competition with a number of firms. I don't need to say their names, but the important thing is that there was a gentleman by the name of Frank Del Rio. And Frank Del Rio, there's always someone. There's always a story. Manny Medina with the Four Seasons, and then Paul Segru with the University of Miami. And here was Frank Del Rio. Frank Del Rio had been the head of Oceania. He had started with a group of Cuban investors. People don't know the story. Names that we all know here contributed to Frank when he created Oceania. So Oceania is acquired by Norwegian Caribbean Lines. Fast forward, what happens with M&As? You're acquired. The people that acquire you do with you what they think. So eventually they start firing all the people, including Frank Del Rio. The company has just acquired him. Now he's out of a job. But the head of NCL at that time gets into an issue, a human resources issue, the president. And the chairman of the board fires this guy and brings back Frank. And when Frank comes back, he cleans house with all his people. So here we are with Frank Del Rio, the one Cuban-American leading one of the top cruise lines in the world, headquartered here in Miami. So we're competing. And we present this idea. And the idea is to create a terminal called the Pearl. And I remember Frank telling me, he said, Willy, tell me about, is this going to put us in the map? And it's very funny because we had just done the terminal for Royal Caribbean next door. But I know how the mind works, and I know when you're in a position of power, how things tend to jive. And I said to Frank, and then he started laughing. He said, Frank, yours is going to be taller and longer than the one next door. He started laughing, says, you're my architect. And the idea here was to do the most precious stone, the most precious stone in the water, in the ocean, which is the pearl. So when you look at the lines of the pearl that you and I saw earlier as we walked through the museum, anybody that's going to Miami Beach and you're going to South Beach and you're driving down the MacArthur Causeway, or the 8.5 million people that take a cruise annually from Miami, which is the cruise capital of the world, when they look to the port, they're going to see Royal, which is the crown. They're going to see the Pearl, which is the NCL, and they're also going to see the Virgin. All three terminals were done by us. Those are our design.
Wow,
so
very nice.
for us to, like Sydney, Australia is known by the iconic Opera House, and for us, Miami, as being the port that it is really known by those three terminals, and they're all ours. So, un Cubano-Americano is responsible for the fact that those iconic terminals are decorating, adorning the port of Miami, which today is cruise capital of the world.
Let me tell you something. It's a landmark, right? I mean, starting with the destination of Miami, but then within Miami and Miami-Dade County, you talk about, what's like a very big tourist attraction, Miami Beach, right? South Beach. And so millions of people drive down there, and that's what they see. And I'll tell you, growing up as a kid, going down there was always very, very impressive. My mom didn't have much money, right? And so we didn't travel much, we didn't go to vacation much. And so I would always look at the terminals and I would always feel like, man, it's so beautiful. Didn't know what it was, but I knew I always wanted to be a part of it and visit it. I didn't end up going into a cruise till I was a lot older, probably in my early 20s. But it's so beautiful, and I applaud you and to have you here and tell us that story. It means a lot, Willy. So thank you for that. So I want to ask you now about the big one. And there's other ones, right? I mean, you just named a few.
Right.
And Riverside was a very beautiful story that you had mentioned to me earlier too. It's where you went to school. And then to have the opportunity to come back, lobby hard to get some funds to rebuild that, right, and make it bigger and beautiful. But for you to have the opportunity to say this is what it's going to look like, right? I think it's full circle, right? It's a moment of full circle.
Well, because I came from Cuba.
Yeah.
In 1960, and by early 1961, I was a student at Riverside Elementary. And to be able to come back as a young man, I designed that. It was like 1986, thereabouts. Octavio Viciedo was the superintendent, the County Public Schools. And again, I mentioned to you, Luis Sabines, who was president of la Camacol, the Chamber of Commerce in Miami, the Cuban Chamber of Commerce. He was instrumental because Riverside Elementary School, the property was too small in accordance with state regulations in the Department of Education. And we had to modify those regulations because what I mentioned to Sabines, I said, we need in Little Havana a new school. That's right. We cannot have our ghetto be with old schools decrepit that are falling down. Right. We need to have new infrastructure. And Luis Sabines was a fighter. And he could hardly speak English. But let me tell you, people listened to him. I don't know how they did it, but they listened to his point. He would always have this brown suit with him. And I know that we went to Tallahassee and we get them to relax. They waived the size and we did a 3-story building. It's the only elementary school in all of Dade County that has 3 levels, a basement, a first and a second levels, the 3 levels. And that was Luis Sabines. But imagine that I was a kid there and I'm able to come back to rebuild the new elementary school. Yeah. So that was to me a great testament. All these stories. Each one of them is always overcoming something that of obstacles. That's right. that we overcome in life. The amount of obstacles that we have overcome as a community is really breathtaking. Yeah. When you really think of it, one right after the other. And it's important, never allowed to put limits on top of you. That's right. You always have to have a breakthrough moment in life.
Yes, sir. So there was some controversy, right, not too long ago, and there was in the news there was some headlines that were coming out, right, with regards to a piece of land in downtown Miami. And it was in result of, right, the presidential library, right? So I think, according to my knowledge, from what I remember, we have mutual friends. One of them, he will be joining this podcast in the near future, and Mr. Felix Lasarte would tell me that there was South Florida was always the destination or the preferred destination, right, of President Donald Trump's presidential library. And I think they had looked at some places in Boca, perhaps, and then somehow they ended up here, which is probably one of the greatest honors that we can have, is to have President Trump's library in Miami-Dade County, in the city of Miami, right next to an iconic landmark, which is the Freedom Tower. And it's my understanding that you are the man to go ahead and put that together, the design, everything, and I know that you're putting your heart and soul into this project. Walk us through how it started from the beginning to where we're at today.
So this is an interesting story. And the folks that are in the Trump organization and the Trump library, they've told me that they want the story to go on film. So at some point, you'll see it in a movie of some kind or documentary. So you're going to be hearing from Felix Lasarte shortly. And I'll tell you how this whole thing happened today. So you're going to hear it in detail. So one day, usually Saturday mornings, I'm with my wife at the house. And, I read the Miami Herald because I want to know how the opposition is thinking. And so Saturday mornings is my day that I have the time and I go through it. And this was a Saturday morning, and I'm having breakfast and I'm scrolling the Miami Herald and I see a story. And the story is Doral, and a project that Donald J. Trump organization just got approved in Doral. Condominium project. And as I'm reading the story, Felix Lasarte comes up. Now, I've known Felix Lasarte for many years, but I wasn't close to Felix, as close as for what happened in my mind next. So as I'm reading about the story, I see that Felix, in addition to being the land use attorney for Donald Trump and getting all these approvals in the city of Doral, for which I was very happy, then the story goes on to say that Felix had been tapped by the Trump organization to lead the effort to do like a due diligence and do tours of different properties to find and identify the ideal location of the presidential library for Donald J. Trump. Now, this sparked my interest. I said, this could be interesting. So I make a little mental note. I don't tell my wife at the time, because she might tell me, don't waste your time. This has already probably been decided. And I sent a text message to a friend of mine by the name of Alvaro Piedrahita. Alvaro used to be the president of T.Y. Lin, which is one of the largest civil structural engineering firms in the country. And Alvaro was a client of Felix. In other words, Felix was a lobbyist for Alvaro for many years. So I knew that Alvaro had a closer relationship, that if I just call Felix and I say, Felix, let's have breakfast, it may not happen. But if Alvaro calls Felix, I know it will happen. So I text Alvaro, say, Alvaro, do you mind reaching out to Felix Lasarte and seeing if the three of us can have breakfast? Alvaro writes back, you got it. In a week, Alvaro writes back, we're meeting Felix such a date at Doral for breakfast. I go there for breakfast, and Felix is a phenomenal human being. I mean, even though I had not seen him in years, it was like we have been together forever. He's that kind of person. You want to hug him and kiss him. He's that kind of guy.
He's a Hialeah guy.
I love Felix Lasarte. So we're talking BS. Like we talk politics, we talk sports, we talk whatever. And towards the end of the conversation of the breakfast, I say to Felix, I understand that you're leading the effort to find the new library location for Donald Trump. He says, yes, I am. So, well, tell me how it's going. He says, well, I've taken the people over FIU. We looked throughout FIU, Tamiami campus, and it, it didn't feel right. We also look, Bernie Navarro, he's pushing for, downtown, the Wolfson campus, the property next to the Freedom Tower, but it's small. And I said, but Willie, there are a lot of interests. And I said, what do you mean interest? Yeah, I don't want to mention the names, but, some people that are close to the president that really want it to be, plus he wants it to be closer to Mar-a-Lago. He doesn't want to be driving down to Miami, the traffic, or having to go Marine One, a helic. He likes Boca. So there's a lot of impetus for Boca Raton. I think it's going to be Boca Raton. I think that's where it's going to go.
That's what he says.
That's what he says.
Yeah.
And I said, Felix, do you mind if I, on my nickel, on my time, with no commitment, you have not enticed me to do this, if I come up with an idea about the one downtown, because that's the one I'm interested in, the one downtown. And he says, go ahead, do it. Perfect. We end the breakfast. I get back to my office. Now I have to be very careful because, first of all, very confidential. Second, I need to make sure that I'm dealing with people in my office that are like me, MAGA, not someone that is kind of veers to the center or left, or left of center. So I get this group of guys, very talented, to work with me, and I start developing an idea. We work on it for about 2 weeks. And finally, I get this one idea, singular idea, of this tall element with a base that has a flag and is very much like a New York skyscraper.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah.
And I send it to, I text it to Felix. Now, Felix is in his 50s. I'm 75. So when I was growing up, the lingo that I was growing up was different than Felix. So Felix texts back to me, says, wow, bro, this is phenomenal. So when I see, wow, bro, I say, wow.
You got it.
Esto está bueno.
Está bueno.
Esto está bueno. This dog will hunt.
Yeah.
Entonces, digo, okay. So, llamo a Felix y le digo, oye, caballo, ¿le gustó? Me dice, sí, le gustó. This is very good. This is very good. I'll get back to you. So a couple of weeks go by, and he calls me back, and he says, listen, we're going to have a call with this guy. I won't mention the guy's name, who works for the Trump organization, and he has some questions to ask. So we have this call. I'd rather not use names at this point.
Yeah, of course.
And this gentleman says to me, very, very formal, Mr. Bermello, can we ask, we like very much what you did. We really like it. Could we ask you to do a couple more things? And I say, yes, tell me what you have in mind. He says, could you put Air Force One in the lobby? And I said, sure, I'll put Air Force One. And I said, is there anything else that you need? He says, well, yeah, I have one more ask. What is that? Just, can you put a little more gold in the design? And I said, listen, I'll tell you the truth. I'm not a gold guy.
Yeah.
I'm not. I'm more into brushed stainless steel and that kind of thing. But I know the president likes gold. So he will have gold. No problem. So I go ahead, we make changes with that, and we make a little video of the design. And I send it to Felix. I said, Felix, I think this is really, really, really turning out really good. Felix sees it. He says, wow, I'm sending it up the flagpole. He sends it up, and the next day he calls me, and he says, you're gonna get ready, because we're gonna go see the big boss. Everybody loved what you've done. So
wow,
a few days go by, and at 9
let me ask you something. At this moment, how are you feeling? How are you feeling that the feedback?
I have to tell you, I feel surreal at this moment. I can't believe it's happening.
Right.
I gotta go. Now at this point, I've already told my wife, obviously, what's going on, but not beyond that, because they have 2-3 guys in the office.
Right.
That no one else knows what's going around. By that time also, you need to know, in January 2024, I had sold my company, so I now I now report to different people, and that because we went through a merger and acquisition, so I said, all these people me van a votar toda esta gente.
So nadie sabía.
Nadie sabía.
Wow, wow.
Right?
Yeah.
Nobody knew anything until
Yeah.
I actually met with the president in D.C. So Felix calls me one night, and he said, "Wait, bro, we have to be in Washington tomorrow at 3:30." So at that moment, I called my secretary. It was late at night. She was at home, and I said, "Hilda, you got to get me on a flight tomorrow, American Airlines. Let's call the manager of American Airlines." He's a great guy by the name of J.C. Liscano. I called J.C. at his house. I said, "J.C., this is what's happening, bro. You're the only one that knows, but I need you to know so that you know how important it is for me to be in that plane.
Yeah.
I cannot miss this." So I wasn't. He said, "I'll walk you to the gate." So we get to D.C. And we're supposed to meet the president at 3:30. I arrived there about 1 o'clock. We go to Trujillo's office, and we're there with Bernie Navarro. Bernie, at that point, he had not yet been Senate confirmed as our ambassador to Peru, and I'm there with Felix. And then I meet the lady who's now my client, who is the secretary or the treasurer of the foundation of the Donald J. Trump Foundation.
That's right. Yeah.
And we're there. It seemed like forever. So we're there from 1 o'clock until 4:15. At 4:15, we get a call from the chief of staff of the president saying, "You got to come over." So we walked over to the White House. Trujillo's office is not far.
See.
And we were there in this little ante-room for another 2 hours.
Wow.
Another 2 hours. It's now 6:30 when we're asked to go in.
Wow.
And I'm not going to go through everything that happened, other than to say that with respect to this particular, first, the president is very engaging. He is.
I was going to ask you, how is he as?
He's a regular. He's like someone that you have a beer and talk about football.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
When we were there, he has on his desk, he has a model of the B-2 bomber, and it was funny that one of the things that he asked me is, "How do you like the bomber?" And I said, "I love it, Mr. President. I mean, it's stealth looking. I mean, it looks like it's Batman, flying into Gotham City. It's really." I said, "It's really cool."
Yeah.
And one of the things that he said is, "Why should I accept a 3-acre property in downtown Miami when they're giving me 30 acres in Boca Raton?" And I said, "Mr. President, with all the respect in the world, I must say this. People will go wherever you build your library. I don't care where you build it. People will go see your library. So rest assured, no matter where you go, people will go. However, Mr. President, this 3-acre site in downtown Miami, it's across from Bayside that has 50 million visitors annually, across from the Port of Miami that has 8.5 million passengers that go in and out. It's across from 2 museums. It's across from the Quesaya Center where the Miami Heat plays. And you're next door, Ellis Island. You're in the center of the world for Latin America at this location. You will have more visitors at your library than anywhere else in the country."
Wow.
And then, but he wasn't through yet.
Okay.
So then he turns to Bernie and he says, "How about the Freedom Tower? Can we do things there, and can we close the street?" And then Bernie says, "Mr. President, Willie already planned on closing 6th Street and converting that into a pedestrian mall. And we'll work with the college so that both properties work together as one. So that'll be no problem." And then Felix says, because then he says, "Well, you can do all that, I'm in." And then Felix says to him, "Well, Mr. President, are you sure? Are you sure you want to be in Miami at this location?" He says, "If you do everything that he said and everything, I'm in. You can count on me." And then that really concluded that part of that meeting. And what was interesting to me was that, by the way, he was so personal.
Okay.
I mean, after he talked about everything in the Oval Office, what he was doing, all the paintings that had been in storage that now he's bringing up to life. He later walked us into a room where we had these plaster molds that he was kind of gold plating to give to the King of Saudi Arabia. And then he took us to this little store. He gave me hats, he gave me cufflinks, he autographed the Bible for me.
Really?
I mean, he was so personal. And when he ended that little tour, now it was like 9:30 in the evening. I mean, I'm saying this is the most important person, most powerful man alive. He's been up since 5 in the morning. Here we are at 9:30. He's giving me MAGA hats, cufflinks, and an autographed Bible. And then he says to me, "Have you ever been here before?" And I said, "Mr. President, this is my first time in the White House." I said, "I always had wanted to come. I had never been inspired until today." And then he said, "Then you haven't seen the Queen's Room or the Lincoln Room?" He says, "No, I haven't. This is my first time." He says, I can't go, but I have my staff will take you to see it."
Wow.
So he took care of, who does that?
Right.
You know, he spent 3 hours with us.
Wow.
I mean, we talked about a lot of other stuff.
Sure.
But it was 3 hours with it. I gave him one of our books of our company that was autographed. He actually looked at it. He said, "You've done all this work?" I says, "Yes, Mr. President, all of this work." So he kept one of my books. So those were really special moments. But what really topped it off, so we finished and we said, "We got to go to have dinner." It was 9:30. I was hungry.
Yeah.
Because really that day when I arrived at 1 o'clock and we were in Trujillo's office, I didn't have lunch. Bernie ordered lunch, but Felix and I and the other people, we had lunch. So I was, yo me comí un chivo ahí vivo. I was really hungry. So we go to the steakhouse in DC, and
That same night.
yeah, and it's Felix, Bernie, this person from the Trump Organization, and there were 3 other people from DHS and Homeland Security, etc., that were unrelated. They just happened to be friends, and then we're all telling the story of what happened. And the person from the Trump Organization, the lady that is my client, she says, "I'm going to tell all of you something that you did not know. At the time that Willy's image arrived, at that time, we were exchanging red line documents for the transfer of the 30-acre property from FAU to the foundation. That design, that image stopped everything. And the reason that you guys came here with me is that no one else in the organization thought that the president was going to be happy. They thought that we were going to be thrown out of the room because everything had moved along so far into Boca. So we came, Jesus, this close to this presidential library being at FAU campus in Boca Raton. If it wasn't for that idea that I sent to Felix, and he sent it up the flagpole, and it got a lot of traction. So if anybody's listening to me, ideas are powerful. Messages are powerful. When you think of, make America great again, that message that has defined the president's really 2 terms in office, it's one idea, one strong message. That design, that one concept that went all the flag, it stopped everything. And today the library is in Miami instead of being in Boca Raton. Not because of me, but because of the idea that I transmitted to Felix, and Felix passed it on to the powers to be.
There's a saying, right, that says, you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans, right? And at the end of the day, I tell people all the time. When I was in office and even now, I say a joke, right? I say a joke and how, when my wife and I got married, right, we always wanted a boy, right? We wanted a son. And so next thing you know, we get pregnant and she gave birth to the most beautiful little girl I've ever seen in my life, Sienna. And so, we were excited and we said, okay, let's try again. And we try again. But this time, we had friends that were doctors and we read different articles on how to prepare to have a boy, right? And we were excited. And next thing you know, she gives birth to the most beautiful little girl I've ever seen again, right? And so it's Samantha. And then, this time we said, well, okay, we know that the diet, we have to incorporate good diet and esto lo otro, and we were reading books and we even traveled to conferences, and so we're like, this time for sure we're going to have a son, And then, well, next thing you know, we have another girl, right? and so, and I guess, what I'm trying to say is that nothing's in our control, right? God is in control. And I think that was a perfect example that you just gave us, Willy. I get goosebumps, right? Because I didn't know that, and I don't think a lot of people.
I have to tell you, Jesus.
Yeah.
If Felix at that breakfast had said to me, Willy, we are already exchanging red lines on the property in Boca Raton, I wonder what I would have done. Because a normal human being says,
yeah, that's it.
This is a done deal. Why waste time? And but it goes to show you that what Yogi Berra used to say, it's not over till it's over.
That's right.
And it wasn't over at that moment.
Wow.
It wasn't over at that moment. And the bottom line is that the Miami property is much better than the Boca Raton property. The Boca Raton property has a height limitation of 45 feet. And you know what the president likes? He likes tall things. So I also knew that we were going to win, just from the standpoint that I said to the president, you can't make a one-story building look iconic. I don't care,
That's right. That's right.
If you want to be Ronald Reagan's ranch in California, that's fine.
Yeah.
But you're known for tall buildings. That's what he's known for. But I'm so happy that I did not know, that I was not influenced at all. It was just, I'm going to wing it. I'm going to go for it. It's like the day that I wrote that letter to the dean, giving him my ideas, what I saw that needed to happen, what they were missing. And that letter took 7 years. This one didn't take that long. This one took, get it to Felix. And when he whirled back, wow, bro.
You knew.
I knew that we were in the hunt.
Willy, I'm telling you, man, it's inspiring, right? And everything that you've done, right? I mean, that's inspiring as well. But those two things, these two stories that you just told us, right? The first one that you had an idea, you wrote a letter, right? And you didn't hear back in 7 years, you didn't hear back. And then you get the call. And then now the fact that Felix didn't even know that you had the slightest interest in being a part of this, right?
No, the day that he had breakfast with me, he had no idea what we were going to talk about.
And there was something inside you that drove you to that.
And frankly, I didn't even tell Alvaro either, because I wanted to go there with a clean slate and without people telling me the probability of this or the probability of that, that kind of stuff.
Wow.
I just wanted to go, hey, I'm going to go for this. Don't set limits on me. Don't start giving me percentages and probabilities of this happening or not, because that starts working in your mind.
Right.
And
right.
So, and it was great. I mean, Felix was, hey, go ahead, man.
Just do it.
Just do it.
Yeah.
Just do it.
Yeah. Let me ask you. So what's next? What's next with the library?
Well, right now, one of the things that they're doing is they're raising funds.
Okay.
And I'm kind of hoping that the Iran war settles, so that right now everybody's attention is in Iran.
Right.
And but we're in the process of doing the preliminary work to getting ready to move forward.
Okay.
We've done some preliminary concept plans. We've prepared cost estimates. We have how they would say we're getting all the ducks in a row to get ready to roll this out. This will be like a 4-year project.
Oh, 4-year project. Wow.
In terms of the design and then the construction.
How many stories?
So the building is 1,047 feet tall, which means it is as tall as you can be, because at 1,048, that's the FAA limit for height in this area.
Okay.
But it's actually going to be 48 stories. So the 48th is the roof. So actually usable stories. So a lot of these stories are tall, are not the same height as a regular building.
Okay.
So the building is going to be like a beacon of light that you can see from the channel when the ships come back to port. You'll be looking at right next. You can actually see it. As a matter of fact, I took a cruise on NCL a few weeks back, to a 4-day cruise to the Bahamas, and that we had to come back as we left for Nassau. We had to return in the evening because there was I think a gentleman had a heart attack on the ship, and they announced loudspeaker that the ship had to turn back. So I got to see something I rarely see, which is coming back to Miami in the evening. So I could see as we were coming into the port, I could see the Freedom Tower lit up, and my wife said, well, where is the Donald Trump library going to be? And I said, you see where that little building, that's tiny building that you see in the distance that's lit up? That's a Freedom Tower. We're going to be right there, but it's going to be way, 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 way taller. Wow. I mean, we will be the best thing that ever happened to the Freedom Tower, because the number of people that will come to both.
That's right.
And will visit both the Freedom Tower Museum exhibit of Miami-Dade College.
That's right.
And the Presidential Library will be phenomenal. They will feed off each other. The best thing that's going to happen to downtown Miami, to the port, to Bayside, to the museums, is that you can have people from all over the world that will want to come to see, not only see, they'll be able to go into Air Force One. They'll be able to see the ballroom that's being built in Washington, D.C. They will see the Oval Office as Donald Trump left it.
Wow.
Because I'm sure that the next presidents may not necessarily have the same decoration taste as he did. And usually presidents come in and they redecorate the office. So the way that he leaves it, that's the way it's going to be. We will have the Hall of Presidents. We will have Marine One. We will have, what they call the Beast, which is the car that he drives. All so that, more than a library, Jesus, it's a museum.
Okay, got it.
It's a museum of the legacy of the president in his first term as 45th president and his second term as 45th. And we will also have the good and the bad. We'll have everything described there. I mean, the 3 life attempts on his life. Wow. Those will be their life for people to learn about his presidency. They'll learn about everything that he did in his first 100 days. Wow. All his decrees, every executive order that he signed, his Sharpies that he uses to do autographs.
Yeah.
Everything is going to be there.
Oh, that's great. That's great. We're really excited about that. And, I was thinking about when you were telling me the height, I kept thinking about one of your breakthrough projects early on, right? Was the Four Seasons. And how high was that? You said it was 700?
That was 700. This will be much taller.
Yeah.
Way taller.
Well, congratulations on that. I hope to be present whenever you do these things, because that's going to be.
Well, I expect to see you at the groundbreaking and
yes, sir.
At the ribbon cutting.
Yes, sir. Both. Yes, sir. So, Willy, ¿qué nos puedes decir de Cuba? Yeah, I wanted to make sure that towards the end of this podcast interview, we talked about probably one of the most important things for you and for me and for our community, which is the future of Cuba, right? We Cuba, and you said something very interesting, right? Early on in the conversation, you said what inspired me to do what I do, I found in Cuba, right? And that was very, it was interesting because you would think you come to this country, right? And this country has all the opportunities in the world and different experiences, right? That you probably didn't have back in the island. However, what drove you to get to where you're at today started in Cuba. I could imagine that, right, that the architecture back then, right, was beautiful. Now throughout the years, the last 60 years, everything has gone to hell, right?
No, and Cuba has been in a time capsule.
Exactly.
There's nothing happening.
So tell me about what your thoughts are on in a free Cuba, how does Cuba get back to what it used to be or even better?
Well, I think it'll be obviously even better. Cuba was in the forefront in terms of technology, culture, advancements, whether in health, connectivity. I mean, when you think about, television and radio in Cuba, I mean, it was as advanced as the United States.
Yeah.
And so Cubans are very industrious people. 90 miles from our coast. The amount of resources that are available today in the private equity markets, it's something that when it's applied to Cuba under a free democratic Cuba, I mean, change is going to come so fast, so quick, that I think people will say, we could not believe this was done in this record time.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if Cuba was a desolate place that was hard to get to, hard to ship things to, then one could say, yeah, it's going to be very different. Just 90 miles away.
Yeah.
Look at all the ports on both sides of the island, but mostly on the north side, with the exception of Santiago, Guantánamo. The different airports. It's a long island, so it has La Carretera Central and the railroad. I mean, Cuba had trolley systems, railroads. It had all the Havana. I mean, it was just incredible. So I think when we have a free Cuba, which is not too far from now, you have the entire business class of Cuban Americans that have been successful in the different areas that are here now with the ability and with ties and connections. What can happen now in Cuba could not have happened back in 1965. We were not as ready as we are today. I really believe that in God's plan, there is a reason. You know, just like listen, there's a reason why Jesus Christ came to this earth at the moment that he came. And he came at the moment that there was a Roman Empire that had roads and had a network that allowed for Christianism and evangelism to spread throughout the world. There was a reason for that. I truly believe that. Now, you're hearing me and you may think differently, but I believe there was a moment. As to, some people say, why was Jesus, the man, born at that moment in time? It was part of the plan. And I believe that it's part of our plan in terms of the rebuilding of Cuba, that is happening now. Not in 1965, not in 1975, not in 1985, but it's happening now where we have a Secretary of State by the name of Marco Rubio, a president by the name of Donald J. Trump, and una clase empresarial cubana, americana aquí, dueños de bancos, dueños de compañías grandes, dueños de compañías de salud, dueños de compañías de construcción, con el poderío económico de poder llevar a cabo una reconstrucción en Cuba rápida, eficaz, efectiva.
Amén.
Así que yo estoy completamente convencido que el tiempo de Cuba es ahora, lo tenemos en nuestras manos, lo vamos a palpar. Mi padre no lo vio, pero yo lo voy a ver, y no solamente lo voy a ver, creo definitivamente en mi corazón que seré parte de esa reconstrucción. Todavía tengo 75 años de juventud, y si yo veo a Diego Suárez, que tiene 99 años y está paradito y con mente clara. Y
sí, señor. Yep.
A mí me quedan todavía unos 24 años que puedo hacer. Imagínate Cuba aquí en 24 años.
Sí, señor.
Con lo que se puede hacer hoy en día en tecnología. Va a ser una cosa rapidísima. Recuérdate que en los años 70 no había internet. Hoy tenemos internet, tenemos inteligencia artificial. Las herramientas, Jesús, que tenemos hoy en día, el poderío, el capital intelectual, empresarial que hay en nuestro vecindario de Miami, es impresionante. Sí, señor. Impresionante. Hoy en día Miami es la capital de las Américas. Los recursos que tenemos, la ayuda que va a haber en Cuba, va a ser bestial. Va a ser bestial. Esto va a ser mucho más rápido de lo que la gente se imagina. La reconstrucción de Cuba viene y va a ser rapidísima.
Willy, yo hemos hablado y hemos visto que un muchacho que vivía en Cuba vino para acá, para este país, y llegó y logró todo lo que tú lograste. Y la contribución que tú has dado, que tú has hecho a Miami ha sido algo que no se ve, no se ve. Hay una parte triste, que esa misma contribución, si tú nunca te tenías que ir de Cuba,
hubiera sido ya.
Pero yo...
Eso no era el plan. Mira, yo estoy convencido. Tú sabes, tú cuando...
But there's something sad to that, right? There's like a... But you're right.
Tú para moldear acero y quitarle las impurezas tienes que meterlo en el fuego.
That's right.
Así que yo estoy convencido que tuvimos que pasar por el fuego para regresar a la patria de uno y hacer algo mucho mejor que nunca hubiéramos podido hacer.
Sí, señor.
Aparte, hemos tenido la bendición de vivir en este país, ya son, en el caso mío, 66 años. Hemos aprendido lo mejor de este país, lo mejor en su organización, en sus sistemas, su compromiso, el trabajo, la ética, la organización norteamericana, que es bestial, no hay nada con... Entonces, regresamos con un conocimiento que no teníamos antes. que no teníamos. Imagínate si nosotros los cubanos somos como somos, de la manera. Imagínate ahora como somos con lo que tenemos ahora de atrás. We're unstoppable.
Yes, sir.
Así que yo creo que es parte del plan de Dios. No estábamos listos en el 60, en el 61, en el 62. Por mucho que hubiéramos querido haber ganado en Vallacochino y después en Missile Crisis, etc. Hubiéramos querido en ese momento, pero no era el plan de Dios. El plan de Dios es ahora.
Sí, señor.
Es ahora.
Sí, señor.
Es ahora. Y todos estamos mucho más preparados. Es una pena aquellos que no están con nosotros,
Sí,
que
señor.
han fallecido, que están en el cielo. Pero los que estamos todavía aquí, sabemos que en este momento este es el momento nuestro.
Sí,
yo
señor.
lo creo en mi corazón y lo veo en las señales que tenemos, lo que vemos en Washington. Piensa en este momento que tenemos la persona más acercada al presidente, en el que él más depende, se llama Marco Rubio.
Sí, señor.
¿Qué posición más beneficiosa la que tenemos en este momento? Que sabemos que nuestro secretario de Estado es una persona que tiene la sangre de Cuba en sus venas.
Sí, señor. No, un producto de esta comunidad.
De aquí, de nuestra comunidad.
Oye, bueno, yo estoy listo para ver las contribuciones de Willy en Cuba. Estamos listos ya para una Cuba libre y espero como tú dijiste ahorita, tener esta misma entrevista, la parte 2, ahí en una Cuba libre.
Así será.
Sí, señor. Oye, Willy, gracias por estar aquí con nosotros. Ha sido de verdad un honor tenerte aquí.
El gusto es mío, el honor es mío. Gracias. Bendiciones.